Coming up on iOS today, Rosemary Orchard and I, Mikah Sargent, talk about the Tips app. That very important, very helpful app you all have on your Apple devices. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard and me, Mikah Sargent, episode 737, recorded Tuesday, January 21st, 2025, for Thursday, January 30th, 2025, a tour of the Tips app. Hello and welcome to iOS Today, the show where we talk all things iOS, iPadOS, watchOS, tvOS, HomePodOS, and look, there are a bunch of operating systems and services that Apple provides, and we are aware of them and want to help you with that and want to help you understand how to use your stuff, your Apple stuff, if you will. I am one of your hosts. My name is Mikah Sargent.
And I am Rosemary Orchard. I'm very excited to be here because I kind of suggested this in the last episode, Mikah, but maybe we were planning this in advance, maybe a little bit. But a little bonus, I always have the Tips app on my home screen when I'm recording iOS Today because it's in my podcasting focus mode. And there is a widget for the Tips app, which I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yes, and we'll have to talk about that. The Tips app used to be this thing that I avoided because I thought, oh, this is for the people who have no idea how to use their phones, and there's not going to be anything that's of importance in there. No. That is not the case, people. The Tips app is a very powerful app that has lots of information in it. And over time, Apple has actually added a special system to iOS, a framework that involves sort of a tips system. That's the best word for it, where apps can display helpful information in the way that the Tips app works. And what's great about this app is that it helps you get your phone, your iPad, whatever it happens to be, set up in the first place, and then you can go from there. And so that's actually what I want to talk about first, is the Get Started section of this app. So in the Get Started section of the Tips app, I've launched the Tips app. You can access it by swiping down on your phone and starting to type in the word Tips, or going into your app catalog, or if you don't have the app, going to the App Store and re-enabling it from there, which is the same as downloading, but it's an Apple app. And so under Get Started, you'll notice the first thing here is a setup checklist, which for me has a checkbox next to it. But let's tap into that and see. So if during the setup of your phone, you skip any of the steps that are involved in your setup checklist, you may see a notification in the operating system and in the settings app. But if you don't, this is a great place to go to make sure you have everything set up. It talks about Face ID. It talks about your Apple account. So signing into your Apple account, that used to be called Apple ID. Whether or not you have iCloud backup turned on. Find My iPhone. A recovery contact, so that if you lose access to your device, having a friend, family member, someone you trust available to help you recover your account. Your medical ID, which is part of the health app, which gives you the ability, if you're ever in an emergency, to have information about you displayed, like medicine allergies and other medical conditions. And then your legacy contact, in the event that you pass, that you die, someone available to gain access to your accounts, to your photos, that kind of thing. So you're passing on that information to a person from there. That's just the first thing, the setup checklist. What's great about this app is that it always displays new content when it comes around, or new features when they come around. Like you'll see the big old Apple Intelligence banner at the top of the page. But I'm not going to talk about that just yet, because I want to show you the other two that are in the Get Started section. And these are helpful for someone who is just getting started with iOS. Navigate Your iPhone gives you a bunch of information about how to move around your iPhone. So for example, how you go to the home screen. So swiping up from the bottom edge to go to the home screen. When apps are active in the dynamic island. when you are trying to switch between apps by swiping up a little bit, not all the way up, to access different apps, but then also just grabbing that little swipey bar at the bottom and moving it to the left or the right. How you open Control Center, how you access other controls in Control Center and see more controls within them. This is essentially taking the many, 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 many back episodes of iOS today and sort of grouping it together in a really easy to understand format. So you can see these beautiful illustrations. And what's great about this is at any time in the top right corner, I can bookmark a specific tip and I can also share tips. So if you have a friend or family member who's going, how do I do this? Sending them this specific page that says, here is how you can silence calls and notifications on your device. And having actual animations that appear there is really handy. The other thing that I'll talk about is the practicing key gestures feature in that Get Started. And so here it talks about what you can do to zoom. So pinch to zoom, place 2 fingers on the screen, pinch open to zoom in or pinch close to zoom out. And it even has a demo you can use to try it out and make sure. And look, it even gives me a little great job. I feel so good. I got my little cookies. And it also has a little haptic feedback that plays while I'm doing that as well. Selecting and editing text by tapping to select a portion of it and dragging the blue pointers. This is a quick little boot camp, if you will, for the key gestures that you use in iOS. Tap, of course, and then being able to touch and hold to reveal more actions, which used to be force press, are also available as well. And I think that those are great ways to give a person who is switching to iOS for the first time or who is switching to a smartphone for the first time the ability to know what's going on. Now, this isn't the only set of options that you have. One place I like to go, first and foremost, is whenever I download a new OS, so the latest version of iOS, is this What's New in iOS 18 feature. We're going to come back to that, though, because I just want to show you this main page. This is the tour of the Tips app, after all. Discover More is going to contain a section of apps and settings that you might want to know about. So photos and camera, for example, how to take photos like expanding the frame, finding group photos, hiding or showing screenshots, pinning important albums and collections using portrait mode, personalizing your iPhone. So how you choose the lock screen, how you can kind of refresh your lock screen with a dynamic set of photos. If you need to make text bigger or smaller on your device, and then also setting customized sounds and haptics. So you can change the sounds your iPhone makes when you get a call, a message, an email, and more. Tap sounds and haptics, then tap an item to pick the vibration and the tone. And what's great is there's a little link here. It's a deep link into settings to give me access to that area. And then last but not least is Genius Picks. And these are my favorite little tidbits of deliciousness, because these have been picked by the experts at Apple who cover this stuff regularly and who get these questions regularly, that tells you, here's what you might not know about or what you might know about. So, for example, this is a feature that I use in iOS now all the time, and it's called Enjoy the Ride. And well, that's the name of the tip, but the actual feature is vehicle motion cues. And so it says, when you're a passenger, you can turn on-screen cues that may help reduce the feeling of motion sickness. Go to Settings, Accessibility, Motion, then tap Show Vehicle Motion Cues. I can confirm whether it's placebo or it's actually working, or whether it's placebo or there's an actual physiological effect. This works for me. Vehicle motion cues, on the rare occasion when I'm a passenger and not driving, will sort of use your phone's internal sensors to display little dots on your screen that tell your brain that what you're looking at is moving at the same speed and the same direction as the things around you. Because if you didn't know, motion sickness in almost every case is caused by your brain noticing a difference between what you're viewing in front of you and the motion that it feels with the proprioception abilities that you have. It's essentially a mechanism for combating poisoning. So if you eat a food that caused you to hallucinate, your brain tells your body, you need to get sick and throw that up or it's going to hurt you. And so you would dispose of it. So now in the modern world where we're less likely to eat things that are harmless or harmful to us, our brain still has that, hey, something's going weird here. You probably ate something you shouldn't have. That's why you start to feel nauseated. This tells your brain, no, what you're feeling and what you're seeing are the same thing. So chill out. Everything's fine. You don't need to get sick. I know that was a long thing, but that's an explanation of that. And then last but not least, I just wanted to mention that depending on the devices that you have connected to this phone, it will also display information for that. So I have an Apple Watch, so I see an Apple Watch section that talks about the Apple Watch. And then also if I have AirPods, in this case I do, it also gives you information about AirPods and all the stuff that you can do, like using AirPods Pro 2, which I have as a hearing aid. Then last but not least are the straight up full-on user guides for iPhone, Apple Watch, HomePod, Apple TV, and AirPods. So the full-on user guide that has all of the information that you need for using those specific devices. Lastly, Actually, Rosemary, I want to let you cut in here if there's anything that you want to mention about those before we continue on here.
I did just want to go back to the motion sickness thing. Getting motion sick is basically, it's a bug between your brain, with like your eyes are seeing one thing and your ears are saying something else and your brain just can't link it up. And there are weird glasses that you can get which have got liquid in them, which basically help reset the fact that your eyes are not getting the same input as your ears for your brain. And the dots on the iPhone are so much better if you're using an iPhone than the weird glasses, from personal experience. I've tried both work, but the dots on the iPhone are my much preferred way of doing it. But one of the things I do really love about the Tips app is I can just search for something. So for example, if I wanted to see, screenshots right now, they're bugging me in my photos view. I don't want to see them. So I search for screenshot and I see, hey, look, hide or show screenshots. And I see, hey, I can hide screenshots from my library to reduce clutter. Swipe down, then press the up-down arrow button, tap view options and tap screenshots, which will turn it off. You can also bookmark tips. And of course, there's a share button as well. So as well as saying, hey, this is really useful, I can look for a tip that explains what it is that my mum's asked me to tell her how to do, or my grandmother's asked me, and I can send them the tip, and then it shows them themselves with the screenshot, which is also much better than me taking a screenshot of a tip and sending it to somebody for accessibility purposes, because their iPhone can read this out to them. If they are using, for example, text-to-speech as an accessibility option, or just to help them. So yeah, I personally find the Tips app, it's one of those things, it got a little bit of a bad rep to start with, but it's really useful now, and especially with the full integration of the guides from the Apple website. It is the same content that you can find on apple.com or support.apple.com, where they've got all those guides. If you want, you can even search for shortcuts, and you will find how to add shortcuts. You can even learn how to customize voiceover gestures and keyboard shortcuts on your phone, or use the back tap, such as double back tap or triple back tap, to trigger a shortcut on your iPhone, which fortunately I've successfully tapped my iPhone there, Mikah, without triggering that action, which is
that is very good. With the Tips app, I find that we had our notifications episode last time, right? And in it, I said, there are lots of apps that don't get the ability to send me information. The Tips app does not count, because the Tips app comes out with new fun stuff that I get to check out that I wouldn't otherwise have access to. I wouldn't otherwise, have in such a it's the condensed format of it, right? We talk about discoverability, what we can access, what we can find. And I think that that is something that the Tips app helps do, is make sure that those features are actually kind of popped up for us, that we know what they are and how they work. So going back to the Tips app, we've got the What's New in iOS 18 feature and everything that's there. Basically giving a person that first stop on the way to knowing what all they can do now that the new version of iOS is out. And I think this is very important when it comes to kind of teaching people about those updates. And so many of you who listen to this show know a bit about iOS, right? And it also means that you're probably the person that people reach out to when they need help. And that's why I'm trying to show you this Tips app, because someone messages you and says, wait, how did you get that emoji to appear on my message? Because I thought I could only do a ha-ha, a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Now all you have to do is tap into the Tips app, hit the share sheet button, the share icon, and be able to send this directly to them. And it's this beautiful, again, animation that shows you exactly how to send a heart eyes emoji as a tap back in the Messages app. So nice to be able to do that. And then lastly here with Apple Intelligence, if I tap on this, then you get to see the features like Genmoji and how Genmoji works. How you can use Image Playground, how you can use the feature in Photos, which lets you kind of clean, they call it cleanup, which will give you the ability to remove things from a photo that you don't want there. The writing tools, which we've talked about before, how you summarize text, how you summarize an audio transcript, which is really nice. Being able to just type to Siri instead of actually having to talk to Siri, asking follow-up questions. And then also one of my favorite new features, which is the ability to say, I need help with this thing. So how do I unsend a message? Or how do I change the color of my app icons? And then Siri will provide that information to you as part of that support feature. So I love Rosemary's kind of pro tip there, being able to just do a quick search and find those things that you're looking for. But I really think that it's worth anyone and everyone hopping in here and checking out what Apple is featuring as things you might need to know, because I have a feeling you might find something in here that you didn't know was a feature. And that is exactly, I think, the magic of the Tips app. Now, if I wanted to always have those tips available to me, of course, we talked about doing the notifications. You said that you have it set to a specific to your podcast focus. Is that the extent of when you have it available and people being able to display it as a widget? And can they, for example, see that widget and then tap on it to have that specific tip pop up for them?
So here in my podcasting focus mode, where I have chosen to have a different home screen, I have the Tips app sort of front and center, literally at the top. And this is showing me at the moment how to hide screenshots. This is quite a nice way of just becoming aware of all of the different new features and functionalities available with a new version of iOS, and also just things that you've forgotten existed over time. And so I like to just have the widget. You can put it in a stack. You can put it wherever you want if you want to have a widget. But then when I tap on this one, it will open up this particular one. And also, because there is this little bookmark here, so something where you're like, oh, that's interesting. You see it on the widget. You don't really have time to look into it now. Tap on it, tap on the little bookmark in the top right hand corner. And then the next time that you open the Tips app, you'll see your saved tips across the top, which can be really nice for the, oh, interesting. I would like to learn about this, but I don't have time to do this now. Or I want to show this to my mom next time I see her. And I kind of want to go through it with her in person, because maybe it's like, you know, how to take photos in a particular way with the camera. So it's quite nice to have it open on my phone, and then she's playing with the camera on her phone, and she can look at my phone with the Tips app for the referencing. So that's how you can save those. But yeah, the Tips app just has a nice widget. And if you tap edit on your home, or if you tap and hold on your home screen and enter jiggle mode, and then tap edit in the top left, then you can add a widget. And then if you scroll down, and in my case, it's quite a long way because I do have quite a few apps installed and a lot of those have got widgets. Then I can see tips, and I can see there is a medium, and there's a large widget. And so if I add the large widget, for example, then it does give me the option then to resize it. And these will all show the same tip. They're not going to show different tips in the same widget. So if you add multiples to your home screen, you're just going to see it in different places. So I have how to hide screenshots twice on my home screen right now, which is maybe not the most productive use of my screen. So I'll just expand that to be a nice full-size one, which includes an image. But yeah, it is quite a nice way. I found, so I always have a widget on my iPad home screen because my iPad home screen is mostly empty with most of the apps in the app library and open through Spotlight. So I do always have it displayed on my iPad, and when I'm podcasting, I always have it on my iPhone because often it gives me a little idea which can inspire a new episode for iOS Today.
Yes, indeed. And that's what I love about, that's what I personally love about the Tips app, is that it provides that inspiration there. The Tips app, again, very powerful, very cool tool that will help you do what we aim to do here on the show, make the most of your devices. If there's a tip that you've seen in the Tips app that you think could make for a great episode, give us a shout. iOS Today at twit.tv is how you get in touch with us. And of course, you can also send your questions, comments, concerns, etc. to that email as well. Alrighty, we have some feedback coming in, and so we will read about that now. Steve writes, "Hi. Simple question for the show. Where in settings do I stop my iPhone from prompting me with directions home or to work every single time I plug into CarPlay? I know where I'm going most of the time." Steve. So what Steve is talking about is how in CarPlay, if you have your device plugged in or wireless, depending on which version of CarPlay you have, while you're on the home screen, and by the home screen, I mean the home view that has multiple tiles on it versus the home screen that has the app tiles on it, you will see sometimes pop up in the top right corner of CarPlay a little prompt that has maybe your home location and your work location. And then the Maps app will start to display, because the Maps app will be in the big square to the left, will start to display your current route and your way home. And yes, if you know how to make it home just fine, you may be annoyed by this, or that you just don't want it to be there. And so basically, Steve is wondering, can I stop it from doing this? And the answer is yes.
Yes. So essentially what this is it will also, for example, if you are just in the Maps app, it will also just pop it up as home, and it'll also show the route. And it won't start navigating until you actually tap and say, okay, go home, or go to work or whatever. But it's popping that up because it's using Siri to learn. Now, this is a Siri suggestion, not to be confused with Apple Intelligence, but if you have Apple Intelligence turned on, it is under the Apple Intelligence and Siri header. But this is a Siri suggestion, so this will apply even if you are not using Apple Intelligence. So in the Settings app, go to Maps, and then inside of the Maps section, inside of Settings, so we're in Settings, not in Maps. And I know this is confusing because you could go into Maps and look for Settings, but no, we need to go to Settings and then Apps, Maps. Yes, I'm aware that sounds very similar, and I'm sorry. But then once you're in Settings, Apps, Maps, Apple Intelligence and Siri, or if you don't have Apple Intelligence, it's just Siri. It's the one underneath location. And then what you can do here is you can turn on and off, learn from this app, and then also suggestions, show in app, show on home screen, and suggest app. Now, I'm guessing that what we probably want to do for you here, and this is not something that I have been able to go out and test myself because I've not been particularly well in the last few weeks, as some folks may be able to tell from my voice. So I was not about to go and sit in a very cold car and drive somewhere and then sit there and see if it pops up the home suggestion. But you're probably going to want to turn off show suggestions in the app for this. Now, if you do this, you're almost certainly not going to get things like it popping up your next calendar event with a location that you rarely go to and so on. That's probably not going to show up there, but that will still show up on the home screen of CarPlay if you have Siri suggestions enabled in CarPlay. So the other thing that you can do is in settings where you have everything. You can also look for the CarPlay option, which I'm currently not finding. So I'm just going to use the settings in search to find CarPlay. There we go. It's under settings and then general. Then you can turn on and off Siri suggestions for CarPlay as well. So that goes away. And that's actually under the Siri section, which is slightly frustrating. But yes, you need to turn off Siri suggestions for CarPlay as well to completely hide everything. But if you turn off the suggestion to show it in the app, then at least if you just got the Maps app open in CarPlay, you're not going to see home and work popping up all the time.
There you go. Beautiful, beautiful. And now that we've got that answered, Steve, which I totally understand that complaint, I believe I can hear the music. It's time for Shortcuts Corner. It's time for Shortcuts Corner, the part of the show where you write in with your shortcuts requests, and Rosemary Orchard, our shortcuts expert, provides a response. This week's Shortcuts Corner request comes in from James, who writes, "How can I export from iOS or the browser my Apple Health data for sleep, HRV, et cetera, as I only see the option to export as a PDF all medical info, but not the app data as above? I want to add," oh, interesting, James. "I want to add it to Notebook LLM for analysis." So James is saying, hey, it seems like I can export my health records, but what I want to export is my health data, the stuff that's coming from multiple apps and different wearables that I might have. How do I export that information? I feel I would be remiss if I didn't say to people, I'm going to assume that James knows what James is doing and that James is fully aware of the implications therein. If you hear what I have just said and you aren't aware of the implications there, and you might try this, and I just want you to know that Notebook LLM is a way to use AI to analyze certain information and then give you answers to that. And on the face of it, it sounds kind of cool, right? I put in my information and my own personal information, and then the system, which is smart, kind of looks at all of it and provides feedback. So I could say, does it seem like there's any trend between when I have high blood pressure and what else I'm doing in the day, for example? And then it could pop out and say, well, it seems like based on the fact that you've listed your food intake, anytime you have high sodium foods, your blood pressure seems to be higher the next couple of days or whatever. But just be aware that in handing this information over to an AI system, you may be training that system with your data. And health data is some of the most personal data that we have. So there's my little caveat. I've said it.
Check the privacy policy. Make sure it's not going to share that data, especially like it's not going to store that data, which could then be shared with somebody that they're not currently saying that they share information with. Because I suspect the last kind of information, or the last person that you want this information ending up with, especially if you're in America and you're looking at your health data to see if there's any problems, would be your insurance provider. So please be very careful with this data. By all means, export it, play with it, put it in numbers if you would like, and see if you can see anything yourself. Share it with your doctor, etc. But yes, do be careful when you are sharing this data, because I would not want anybody to end up with any kind of problems that they weren't foreseeing with this. But we are assuming, of course, that James knows what James is doing here. And so I am going to show folks how you can export this data, because it could be useful as well to put this into another application that maybe doesn't integrate with Apple Health, or just to be able to export it and put it in numbers for your own personal records, just to see, year over year. Maybe you're doing your health year reps for 2024 and you want to see how, on average per month, how much did you sleep, etc. So what you can do inside of Shortcuts is the Health app has a number of shortcuts actions. So it's got things like being able to log a workout, logging health samples, opening the various sections of the Health app, but it's also got find health samples. And this is probably what we're going to want. So what we need to do, we need to find health samples, and we're going to look for a particular type. I'm going to just leave this as steps for the time being, and start date is in the last X number of days. So for example, in this case, I'm just going to get my steps for the last 7 days. So if I run this action, then I'm going to see I have 1,590 records of my steps over the last 7 days. Now I can see there's like 30, 41, 29, 20. And yeah, there's a lot of data here. So I'm probably going to need to export that as something that is a little different. But depending on what type of data you choose to export, you're going to have different options. So I could export this as a unit of count or percentage. Now, I don't personally understand how percentage is going to help me with steps. That seems a little bit of a weird unit option. But anyway, moving on. There's also a group by, so I can choose to group it by minute, hour, day, week, month, 3 months, or year. And then I can also sort it. And then I can also limit it. So I can say, hey, I only get the last 5 samples. Before you limit it, I would say just maybe have a look and run just this singular action, and just see how many records you get back. Because if you limit it to 5, and there are 1,590 records, you are not going to be giving yourself accurate data to do any kind of analysis with. So that with that little piece of advice said, now what we need to do is we're going to need to repeat with each. Now, I'm not going to share the shortcuts for this because unfortunately it is very much going to depend on what kind of data it is that you're looking to export as to what exactly you need to do to get all of that data out. So I've got to repeat with each, and then inside the repeat with each, I'm going to use a text action. And so here in my text action, I need to insert my repeat item, and then we have the more complicated part. So it's not just the repeat item, okay? Because the repeat item is just going to give me 30, 42, 29. It's just going to give me a number of steps. It gives me no other useful information with this. So I'm going to start with my start date. Okay, and then I am just going to add a little comma by tapping out of the repeat item option and using the keyboard. Then add my repeat item again. And then I'm going to add my value. Okay, and then I'll just comma, insert my repeat item once more. Type, let's put the type in there. Comma, insert my repeat item again. And this is why it's going to have to be specific. Source, we need to know the source because, for example, I have an iPhone, I have an Apple Watch, I have an Oura Ring. All of these grab data and they put it onto my phone and they store it in Apple Health, and Apple Health figures out what the correct thing to do with this data is. But that means that I also need to know the source of the data because I'm just getting all of these results here back. Now, I could theoretically filter and say, hey, I would like my source to be something, but the problem is I don't have the source options to choose from here, which makes it kind of tricky in shortcuts. Like I would have to come up with a way to select the source type, and that's not something you can do in shortcuts. So having the source there as an option is not great. Either way, I've got my start date, I've got the value, I've got the type of the value, or the type of the data and the source of the data. And so I'm just going to run this now. Or actually, tell you what, for the purposes of demoing this, I am going to limit this to just 5 results because if I try and read it for 1,600 results, it's going to take a while. So now I can see 14th of January at 8:03, 30 steps, and then Ura. Okay, so my start date, I'm just going to tap back on that. Okay, and if I scroll down, then I can see at the bottom that my date format is medium, my time format is none. I'm just going to change this to ISO 8601, which if you're doing any kind of data analysis is the kind of date format I would recommend. It is a standardized, easy to parse by computer date format. And then as well as the date, I didn't want to insert the word no. Let's just scroll down and I'm just going to toggle on the time there as well. Okay, because this will mean that, for example, if I put this into Excel or numbers, I can easily sort on that date column and everything's going to go into the right place. So I can see now I've got a whole bunch of data. I've got most of these are from my ring, my Oura ring, which has previously been a sponsor of Twit, I should note. And then I've got one log from my iPhone as well. So now I've got some results. What I need to do is I need to combine this text. I'm going to combine it with new lines. And then I am going to set the name of the file to health data .csv. And CSV is comma separated values. So what I've done here is I did start date, comma, value, comma, type, comma, source. And because I put the commas in between, that is separating the data in this file. So it's a comma separated value, which can be opened easily by things like numbers and Excel. And I'm presuming that the LLM, Notebook LLM, is going to have the ability to import that as well. If it doesn't, then I'm sure somebody has got a way to convert a CSV into something it can parse and import. Also, if you're getting really nerdy and doing something like using Python, Python can handle CSV files very well. So we just need to set the name, and then I'm just going to pop in a little share action at the end so I could then share this file. And so there we go. I'm going to always allow that. And then ta-da, that has combined that into a CSV file, which is now just one singular file that can be imported and handled by anything else. Now, if you've got sleep data, you're going to have more fields that you're going to need to get. So for example, sleep data, you will need the start time and the end time. For example, you need both those times so that you've got the whole period. You need the kind of sleep it is, not just the kind of data it is, and so on and so forth. And so for every different kind of data that you want, you're going to have to get a little picky about how you set this up within shortcuts so that you get the actually useful data, which is why I'm not going to share the shortcut, because I do want you to go through and look at the options. But inside that repeat with each and your text, tap on the repeat item after you've inserted it and just select the kind of value that you want before adding your comma and then proceeding to your next column, because each of the commas separates the column of data from the next one. So that is how you can export that, which can also be very useful. For example, if your doctor has asked you to keep a track of your blood oxygen readings for a while, because maybe you've been very congested and they're a little bit concerned and they would just like to export that. They'd like to receive that data themselves so they could import that into their system. You can then export your blood oxygen levels and send that over to your doctor, for example. Or in my case, I just showed them the chart on my iPhone and the doctor said, yeah, that's not great. We're going to give you a nice new inhaler, which you can also track in Apple Health. So there we go. But it's useful to be able to export this data, but please be careful what you're doing with it, because I don't want anybody to do anything they regret. And don't forget, if you put it on the internet, you would have to be okay with your grandparents, your grandchildren, and your employer seeing this information at any point in the future and potentially using that against you.
Indubitably. So there you go. That is wonderful. And for people who are considering using Notebook LM, of course, it's a Google property, and so it's very easy to import from Google Sheets. So James would have no problem getting that CSV file or multiple CSV files into Google Sheets, which can then be linked to the Notebook LM to do that analysis. So thank you, James, for writing in. All right, Rosemary Orchard, if people would like to follow you online, where should they go to do that?
Well, the best place to go is rosemaryorchard.com, which has got links to apps, books, and all the things I'm involved with around the internet. Or you can find me in the Club Twit Discord, where people post fun things, including there's a general discussion for every for iOS Today, and there's also threads for every episode, where if you've got individual questions, you can pop in there and ask. Micah, where can folks find you?
If you're looking to follow me online, you can find me at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to catch my other shows, including Hands on Mac, Hands on Tech, and Tech News Weekly, plus my club show, which I continue to enjoy bringing to those of you in the club, my Micah's Crafting Corner. So check all of that out. And we'll catch you again next time for another episode of iOS Today. Bye-bye.